You can ignore it. You can rationalize it. You can pretend it has nothing to do with you, but your mind never forgets what you chose to hide. The more you pretend everything is fine, the more your life begins to quietly fall apart. Carl Jung said that nothing influences our destiny more than what remains unconscious. You think you're in control, but you're being controlled by everything you refuse to look at. Relationships that always end the same way. Self-sabotage when everything seems to be going well. Emotions you can't explain. This is not bad luck. It's not coincidence. It's your psyche trying to get your attention. The pain you avoid, the memory you repress, the feeling you hide, all of it forms what Jung called the shadow. And the shadow doesn't disappear when ignored. It grows. It grows in silence, waiting for the right moment to show itself. Today, you're going to discover how a single unresolved emotional pattern might be shaping every area of your life, and why facing it might be the only way out of repeating the same cycles. This is not just psychology, it's a mirror, and if you have the courage to look, what you'll find might be the beginning of your liberation. Rick was always the kind of person everyone admired, hardworking, polite, kind. He always did everything right, followed every rule, never raised his voice, never caused problems. On the outside, everything seemed fine, but on the inside, there was something even he couldn't explain. A constant emptiness, anxiety without reason, a sense that something was wrong even when everything was going right. Rick didn't understand why he felt so alone even when surrounded by people. He didn't understand why every time a relationship started to go well, he would lose interest or do something to push the other person away. For years, he believed that was just his way of being. Until one night, in the middle of an insomnia crisis, he started searching for answers, and that's when he came across a quote from Carl Jung that stopped him cold. The quote said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Rick read that and felt something deep shift inside him. For the first time, he wondered if there was something hidden behind his patterns, something he didn't want to see. He began revisiting old memories, forgotten situations, wounds that had never healed. He discovered that in childhood, he had learned that being loved meant never disappointing anyone, that showing anger was dangerous, that asking for something was selfish, that crying was weakness. Without realizing it, Rick had spent his whole life trying to be perfect so he wouldn't be rejected. And every time someone got too close, he sabotaged it because his unconscious associated intimacy with pain. This wasn't something Rick did rationally. It was an automatic, invisible mechanism shaped by his story, fueled by repressed emotions. Carl Jung said the shadow isn't made only of violent traumas, but of everything you were forced to hide. In order to be accepted, the need to please, the fear of making mistakes, the shame of feeling anger, all of that was pushed inside Rick, forming an emptiness he tried to fill with approval, success, and control. But the truth is, what he most avoided feeling was exactly what had the most power over him. And it was only when he began to face those emotions without judgment that something inside him began to shift. It wasn't fast, it wasn't easy, but it was real. Rick realized that facing pain didn't destroy him. It freed him, because the suffering you face is always smaller than the weight of a life lived in denial. Jung taught that self-knowledge isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. And that begins when you have the courage to look at the part of your mind you've always avoided. Carl Jung believed that the human mind is like an iceberg. The part you can see is only a fraction of what truly exists. Beneath the surface, hidden in the unconscious, are all the desires, fears, and memories you couldn't process. And when you don't confront that content, it begins to manifest indirectly. That's why you repeat patterns, attract the same kinds of people, feel the same emptiness even when your surroundings change. What's repressed doesn't disappear. It finds a way to emerge, often through symptoms like anxiety, insomnia, compulsions, unexplained sadness. Jung said every symptom carries a message. The pain isn't there by accident. It's a call, a request for attention. But most people ignore that call. They medicate the symptom, rationalize the suffering, blame others or themselves. And so they keep living in a cycle of repetition, not realizing that the problem isn't outside, it's inside. It's not about positive thinking or controlling emotions through willpower. It's about recognizing what your mind has spent a lifetime trying to hide. And that process is not comfortable, because looking at the unconscious requires radical honesty. It requires admitting that many of your choices weren't truly free, but automatic responses to old wounds. It requires acknowledging that the control you try to maintain is just a way to avoid the fear you don't want to feel. It requires courage to let go of the masks, the roles, the narratives you created to protect yourself. And that's where real transformation begins. Jung called this process individuation, the path through which a person becomes who they truly are. And that only happens when you integrate the shadow, when you recognize that anger, fear, envy, selfishness are not flaws to eliminate, but parts of yourself that need to be understood. And the more you deny those parts, the more they control you. Because everything you reject in yourself finds a way to manifest in your life, sometimes as self-sabotage, other times as projection onto others. You see in others what you can't bear to see in yourself. And when you react with disproportionate intensity to certain situations, you're probably reacting to something within you that was touched without your awareness. That's why Jung said that true change begins when you stop looking outward and start investigating what's inside. And the closer you get to the truth your mind avoids, the more you begin to reclaim the power you've lost over the years. The power to choose, to feel, to act consciously. Pain doesn't just disappear. It dissolves when it's felt, understood, and embraced. And what's coming next goes even deeper. Because the unconscious mind doesn't just hide your pain, it also hides your potential. And that's what you're about to understand. Carl Jung was not alone in his discoveries. The idea that the unconscious shapes our choices and emotions had already been perceived for millennia in ancient traditions like alchemy, Taoism, and even Greek philosophy. But Jung went further. He gave language and structure to this process. He studied alchemical symbols not as magic or mysticism, but as symbolic representations of the psychological journey of integrating the psyche. In alchemy, transforming lead into gold was a metaphor for transforming inner chaos into consciousness. For Jung, this journey was real, and every human being goes through it in a unique way. The process of individuation was, for him, equivalent to the alchemist's great work, facing the shadow, accepting repressed pain, listening to dreams, and recognizing inner impulses were not just therapeutic tools, they were rituals of psychic transformation. And it's not just analytical psychology that confirms this. Modern neuroscience is also beginning to understand that repressed emotions don't disappear. They remain active in the brain, influencing decisions, creating alert states, interfering with memory and perception. Studies show that unprocessed emotional experiences are stored in the body and nervous system. This means the past you avoid continues to operate as if it's still happening. An ignored trauma is not forgotten. It is silently repeated. And this has real impacts, from psychosomatic illnesses to chronic patterns of self-sabotage. Jung said that dreams were the language of the unconscious. While you sleep, your psyche sends encoded messages about what needs to be seen. A symbol that appears repeatedly, an image that causes discomfort, a dream scenario that repeats with small variations. All of this is raw material coming from your shadow. The problem is that most people ignore their dreams or consider them meaningless. But for Jung, the unconscious never speaks by accident. Every symbol is an invitation to self-knowledge. Every dream figure is a reflection of your current psychic state. And it's not just dreams. Slips of the tongue, memory lapses, exaggerated reactions, all of these are signs, small cracks in the surface of the ego, through which the unconscious tries to manifest. Jung called this synchronicity, events that seem like coincidence but carry a hidden psychological meaning. When you start paying attention, you realize life gives you clues all the time. A book that appears at the right moment, a random conversation that reveals something important, a repeated situation that exposes a pattern. What Jung proposed was a way of living more consciously, more aligned with the totality of being. Not just with what is accepted, but with what was rejected. And that's a paradigm shift, because we were taught to avoid what we feel, to hide anger, to mask fear, to deny pain. But what you avoid feeling becomes the prison you build for yourself. When you understand that, something shifts. Pain stops being the enemy and becomes an ally. It becomes a compass pointing to where you need to look. And that gaze can completely transform the way you exist, because the more conscious you become, the freer you are. Free from repetition, free from projection, free from the invisible chains that keep you tied to the past. And what you're about to see in the next part can open your perception even more, because not everything that's hidden is pain. Part of what you hide is also power. What if everything you're looking for was already inside you, but buried under layers of conditioning, fear, and forgetfulness? What if the emotions you try to control were actually clues left behind by forgotten parts of your identity? Have you ever wondered why certain people trigger such intense reactions in you, even without an obvious reason? Why certain situations make you feel like you're reliving something you've already been through, like a cycle? Most people believe their reactions are rational, conscious, chosen. But Carl Jung revealed that the opposite is true. Most of your decisions are automatic responses programmed into the unconscious. And the most unsettling part is that you don't even notice it. You repeat the same relationship patterns even though you know how they'll end. You sabotage yourself right when you're about to get what you want. You make excuses not to change, even while being unhappy with the life you live. Why does this happen? What is the invisible force guiding your choices? Jung called it autonomous complexes, unconscious psychic structures that act like small personalities within your mind. They have their own motivations, desires, even memories. And when they're activated, you're no longer in control. What you feel is not just about the present. It's about everything unresolved. But the question few people ask is why the mind hides exactly what most needs to be remembered. What is the purpose of this repression? Jung said the unconscious is not the enemy. It's a guardian. It protects you from experiences that at some point would be unbearable to face. But what was once unbearable can be integrated today. The problem is that no one teaches how to do that. You grow up learning to avoid pain, not to understand it, to mask emotions, not to listen to them. And so, entire parts of your identity remain frozen in time, waiting to be seen. But how do you know what's hidden? How do you access those parts? How do you recognize the signals of the unconscious amid the chaos of everyday life? There are clues. There are patterns, but they're not obvious. They don't reveal themselves easily. It takes attention, listening, presence. And there's a technique Jung used with his patients to reveal unconscious content hidden in the smallest details. But this technique only works when you let go of the need to control the process, when you allow the mind to speak without filters. And that's what we're going to talk about next. A forgotten but powerful key to access what you most need to hear. When Brian finally faced what he had been avoiding, he didn't become weaker. He became more whole. Because what Jung revealed is that true strength doesn't come from repressing emotions, but from integrating them. When you accept fear, it stops controlling you. When you listen to anger, it shows you where your boundaries were crossed. When you embrace sadness, it reveals what truly matters. Nothing that is repressed disappears. Everything stays alive, waiting to be seen. The truth your mind avoids is the same truth that can set you free. When you allow yourself to look inward without judgment, You begin to reclaim parts of yourself that had been asleep. You realize you no longer need to hide behind masks, that you don't need to keep repeating stories that aren't yours, and that you don't have to keep running from the past as if it were the enemy. Pain, when understood, becomes wisdom. Chaos, when observed consciously, reveals patterns. And what once felt like a burden becomes a bridge to freedom. That's what happened to Brian. When he stopped trying to be who he thought he should be and started listening to who he really was, everything changed. His decisions became guided by authenticity, not fear. His relationships stopped being built on neediness and started being rooted in truth. What was once a life marked by anxiety became a journey of presence. Because the more you know yourself, the less the unconscious controls you. Jung called this process individuation. It's not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole, uniting your inner opposites, embracing both light and shadow, recognizing that you are made of contradictions. And there's nothing wrong with that. True psychological health isn't the absence of conflict. It's the ability to live consciously within it. And that's the greatest gift of all. To live with presence, with clarity, with freedom. The mind that denies creates imprisonment. The mind that sees transforms. And when you learn to look inward, you change the way you see the world. You stop reacting automatically and begin choosing with awareness. You stop feeling like a victim of your own thoughts and become the author of your own story. That's the difference between surviving and living. And it all starts with a simple question. What are you still avoiding? You can spend your entire life running from a part of yourself that just wants to be heard. You can build relationships, make choices, even follow an entire career path, trying to silence an inner voice that never stopped calling. But the unconscious has a curious way of showing up. It appears in the people you attract, in the dreams you ignore, in the mistakes you repeat. It disguises itself as coincidence, as bad luck, as destiny, until the day you stop and choose to look. Carl Jung said that what you do not bring into consciousness returns as fate. And what if the destiny you believe you have isn't real? What if it's just a reflection of what still hasn't been healed? The question is simple, but deep. Who is deciding for you right now? Is it your awareness or the sum of the parts you never wanted to face? Imagine what would change if you accessed what truly drives you. Imagine what your life would be like if you no longer needed to hide who you are. In the next episode, we're going to explore the archetype that guides most of your decisions without you even realizing it. A deep psychological aspect that shapes your desires, fears, and even your passions. And once it's revealed, it forever changes the way you see yourself. Now, if this touched something inside you, if at any point in this video you felt like you needed to hear this, then don't let this message get lost. Like this video now, subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell so you don't miss the next episodes, and share it with someone you know needs to hear this too. And tell me in the comments, what do you feel your mind has been avoiding? Write it with honesty. Your answer might open the path for someone still trapped in silence. Let's transform pain into clarity and the unconscious into consciousness.